Hey everyone. This is your lesson on how to write checks. So this note here is going to be really important for you to hang on to because it has a lot of really good information about how to write checks, and you'll be able to use this when you are doing your quizzes and tests. So please make sure you don't lose this. Put this right into your math binders. So as we go through this, make sure you have a pen because we're going to go through and highlight some stuff, and then I'm going to do some examples with you. So at the top here, you have an example of what a check looks like. So they always look a little bit different, but they all have the same key components. At the top here, number 1, okay, this is where all your personal information goes. Okay, so your personal information will include your name, your address, including the city, the province, and the postal code. Okay, so that will usually be printed already on a check when the bank gives you checks for your bank account. But in this class, you're going to have to put that information in. The next thing you're going to see is number 2. Up at this top corner here, you have the check number. So whenever you get a checkbook, all of the checks in there are numbered so that you can remember exactly how many checks you've given out already, and then you can keep a good record of what checks you've written. So this top right corner, that's your check number, and then it also has a matching one down here at the bottom. Your bank information can be found under here. Okay, so remember, the top one is your address and the bottom one is your bank's address. Okay. Number 4 here, these numbers down here, that's your bank's routing number. So it's just used to identify which bank your check is coming from. You often will need this if you're going to, let's say, write a direct deposit form. So maybe you get a new job and they want to know how to deposit that money into your account directly. That way they can skip writing you checks. You can get that information off the bottom of any checks that you have. Okay, so that's your bank's routing number there. And then number 5 here, that's your actual bank account number. So the account that the check is going to come out of. So that's just some key components of this check that you may need. But down here is really the important stuff for you because that's how you write a check. Okay, so some things that you really need to pay close attention to are the date. Okay, and you'll find that right up here where it says date. This might not be today's date. It's going to be the date that you want the check to be cashed. So sometimes you'll give a check to somebody, but you don't want them to actually take that money from your account until a month from now. So you can do what's called a post-dated check. Okay, post-dated just means that it's going to be cashed a little bit later than when you actually gave them the check. Okay, so that goes up here. Where you see it say pay to the order of. Okay, right here, that top line says pay to the order of. That is the person or the company that you are writing the check to. Okay, and you got to be careful of spelling here. You want to try to make sure that you spell everything correctly, or the bank may not accept that check. Okay, the dollar amount, where you see this dollar sign here, that's the actual amount of the check, and you're going to do that in numerical form. So you're going to actually write it as a number there. Okay, this first long line, okay, there's no information in front of it, so it's not labeled at all. That big long line, that one there is going to be the amount of the check, so same as before, but now it's written out in words. Okay, this is where we were practicing how to write numbers as words. That's where this is really important. And again, it needs to be spelt correctly. Okay, this little part here where it says, it has a line and then the number 100. That's where you're going to write in the number of cents you have. So maybe let's say you were writing a check for $25.75. Okay, you would write 25 in words, and then you would write 75 as a number right in front of that line. So it ends up being a fraction, right? So for example, this one's 85 cents and it has 85 out of 100 cents. So it's just a fraction of a whole dollar there. This line down here, the memo. Okay, this one is typically optional. They'll still cash the check if you haven't put something in there, but it's a really good idea to include something. So you want to write down what the check is for. So maybe you're using a check to pay your cable bill, so you might write cable bill in the memo. That way, when the bank actually cashes the check, you can look at your account information online, and you'll, instead of just seeing a really long number for that transaction, you'll actually be able to see, okay, that was the cable bill that came out. So you know that that check has been cashed. Okay, it makes it much easier for you to track your spending. And this last long line here, this other blank line with nothing written next to it, that is where you have to sign your name. Okay, I know some of you maybe don't have a signature yet, but this is a good time to practice one. Okay, so I'm going to use this check here as an example on what you would do on the next page. So I'm going to make up a situation. So I just got a new apartment and my rent is $625 and for some reason 50 cents. So it's $625.50 a month. So that's how much I have to pay my landlord. Let's say my landlord, let's say his name is John Doe. Okay, John Doe, that's my landlord. And this is going to be for April's rent. Okay, so I need to pay for my April's rent. So I'm going to write a check based on this information here. Okay, so the first thing I would do here is make sure that my name and my address is correct. Okay, so you guys will have to actually write your name in there. So I'll write Jenna Lilly at the top of this check. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, right, I'm going to go in order here. I'm going to write the date next. So I know that this is for April's rent, which means my landlord has to cash the check on April 1st. I don't want him to cash the check early because I might not have the money in the account before April 1st. So I'm going to make sure that I write the date as April 1st, 2019. So this check cannot be cashed until that date. The next thing I want is to fill in my pay to the order of line. So I'm paying to the order of my landlord, whose name is John Doe. So I'm going to write John Doe. Okay, maybe it's a company name. You could put the company name in there instead. But if I know the person's name, I'll put that. All right, so the next line here is the amount of the check, and it's going to be in number form. So we're going to write it exactly like this, $625.50. My next long line here, this big one, this is where I have to write this number out in words. Okay, so make sure that you don't write too big or you might run out of space. And this is where you want to really try to write your neatest. So 625. Okay, the next little trick here is if you have all this space left over, I want to make sure that no one else can write any more information in there. So I don't want them to be able to put the word 1,000 after, because then they could take a whole bunch of extra money. So I will draw a line to take up all that space. Okay, and then remember, you still have to put the 50 cents in here. You do not have to write the cents as words. So I'm just writing my whole numbers here, 625, and then the 50 cents comes at the end near that 100. So that line fills in all that space and then put 50 at the end. Okay, my memo is just what is this check for? So this check is for rent, so I am just going to put rent in the memo line. And then the very last step, this long line here, that's where you have to sign your check. Okay, so you want to make sure that your signature matches the one that the bank has on file, because if not, then they might think that someone stole your checkbook. So, and they won't cash your checks. So make sure that when you do open a bank account, whatever signature you use there, make sure that's the one you're going to use all the time. Okay, so like I said, good time to practice this now. So whenever you write a check, I want you to go through this checklist and make sure that you did all of these things completely. So keep that with you when you're doing it. If you flip the page over, okay, this part here, I'm going to let you do that by yourself. So this activity, it gives you 3 different situations where you have to write a check. So you need to read these very carefully because it gives you all the information that you need. Okay, the checks are on the other side here. So you have a bunch of blank checks that you can practice with. This question here is also a little bit trickier because it gives you a bell bill. So for whatever bell service is, this bill here, you need to be able to read it in order to know how much your check should be for. And then you need to know what your account number is, and you need to know the date that you have to pay by. Okay, so there's lots of information on this section here that will really help you. So read all of those headings very carefully when you do that activity. Okay, so I want you to practice those on your own, but make sure you're using your note, that first page. Okay, the next page is here. Keeping a balance. This was the same stuff that we did yesterday, okay? So this is just an assignment based on what we did yesterday. You can go back to yesterday's note to remember. Okay, same idea when you're filling in your bank balance. And then for this one here, again, you're reading this bill and you're writing a check. So this is an assignment that I am going to collect from you. So please make sure that is done completely. Okay, at the very end of class, if you still have a little bit of extra time and you still owe me some late work, please make sure you go back and you're working through that. And if you have extra time on top of that, then I've got a couple puzzles that you can work on and stuff to kind of exercise your brain. So make sure that you ask at the end of class if you're done early. Okay, have a fantastic class and I will see you tomorrow.